The Galactic Military Academy stood on Vareth Prime like a mountain made of black glass. It had trained warriors from 17 different species for more than 300 years. The buildings reached toward the purple sky, and the training grounds stretched for miles in every direction. Soldiers who graduated from this place became legends. Those who failed were forgotten. Commander Drexel walked through the main hall with heavy steps. His scales were black like polished stone, and his forearms hung at his sides like weapons waiting to be used. He was a Corvan, one of the most feared warrior species in the known galaxy. He had trained thousands of recruits over his long life, and he had broken every single one of them. It was his job. It was his pride. No one lasted more than an hour in their first combat assessment with him. Today was different. Today, the first human would arrive at the academy. Drexel had read the reports about humans. They came from a small blue planet called Earth, a world so dangerous that most species could not survive there for more than a few days. The gravity was heavy. The weather changed without warning. The animals killed for food and for sport. And somehow, humans had not only survived on this death world, but had spread across every corner of it. Still, Drexel was not impressed. Humans had no natural armor. Their skin was soft and could be cut easily. They had no claws, no venom, no ability to regrow lost limbs. They could not see in the dark or hear sounds from far away. On paper, they were one of the weakest species to ever request membership in the Galactic Coalition. The Coalition had accepted their request only because humans had something else. They had survived their planet. That alone made the Council curious enough to give them a chance. Cole Bennett arrived at the Academy on a transport ship that looked old and worn compared to the sleek vessels of other species. He stepped off the landing platform and looked around at the alien world with calm eyes. He was 26 years old, with brown hair cut short and a face that showed no emotion. He stood at 6 feet tall, which was average for a human but short compared to most species at the Academy. He carried only a small bag with his belongings. He did not look nervous. He did not look excited. He simply looked like a man who had arrived somewhere and was ready to begin. The other recruits had gathered to watch him arrive. There were Veth, insect-like creatures with hard shells and clicking mandibles. There were Saurochs, reptilian beings with thick tails and sharp teeth. There were Thornax, massive creatures covered in natural armor that could stop most weapons. And there were young Corvans, hoping to become warriors like Commander Drexel. They all stared at the human. Some laughed quietly among themselves. Others simply watched with curiosity. A few looked away, already bored by what they saw. Cole walked through the crowd without acknowledging them. He had been told where to go, and he went there. His footsteps were quiet against the stone floor. The assessment hall was a large circular room with a pit in the center. The pit was 20 feet deep and 30 feet wide. Its walls were smooth so that no one could climb out until the assessment was finished. Seats rose up around it like stairs, allowing hundreds of spectators to watch the fights below. Today, the seats were full. Cole descended into the pit using the stone stairs built into one side. He reached the bottom and stood in the center, his hands at his sides. He looked up at the faces watching him from above. Most of them expected him to fail. He could see it in their eyes. Commander Drexel entered from the opposite side. His heavy body made the stairs shake as he walked down. When he reached the bottom, he was nearly 3 feet taller than the human. His forearms flexed slowly, the muscles beneath his scales rolling like cables of steel. He circled Cole like a predator examining prey. His yellow eyes studied every inch of the human body, looking for weaknesses. He found many. "Your species begged to join our coalition," Drexel said. His voice was deep and rough, like stones grinding together. "You have no natural armor, no venom, no regeneration. Your bones break easily. Your skin tears with little effort. What makes you think you belong here? Cole did not answer immediately. He watched the commander circle him, turning his body slowly to keep facing the larger creature. His breathing was slow and steady. Answer me, human. I was told to report for assessment, Cole said. His voice was calm. Not to explain myself. The crowd above went silent. No one spoke to Commander Drexel that way. Recruits showed respect. Recruits showed fear. They did not speak back like equals. Drexel stopped circling. He stood directly in front of Cole now, looking down at him with an expression that mixed anger with something else. Curiosity, perhaps. Or maybe it was the beginning of respect. You are either very brave or very stupid, Drexel said. Maybe both, Cole replied. A Thornax recruit in the crowd made a sound that might have been laughter. It was quickly silenced when Drexel glanced upward. The assessment is simple, Drexel continued. You will stand in this pit, and I will test your ability to survive. There is no time limit. The test ends when I decide it ends, or when you fall and cannot rise again. Cole nodded. I understand. Do you? I have never had a recruit last more than 1 hour. Most fall within the first few minutes. The record is held by a Thornax who lasted 43 minutes before his shell cracked and he begged me to stop. Drexel leaned closer, his hot breath washing over Cole's face. You have no shell, human. You have nothing. Cole looked up at the massive alien without flinching. Something flickered in his eyes, something quiet and deep that Drexel could not identify. My grandmother used to say something, Cole said softly. She said that humans do not know when to quit. She meant it as a criticism. But I think she was describing something else. Something that kept us alive when everything on our planet wanted us dead. Drexel pulled back slightly. For a moment, just a moment, he felt something he had not felt in centuries. It was small and cold, like a tiny piece of ice in his chest. It was doubt. He pushed the feeling away. This was just a human. Soft skin, breakable bones, no natural weapons. Whatever spirit lived inside this creature, it would break like all the others. We begin now, Drexel announced. The crowd leaned forward in their seats. The Veth clicked nervously. The Saurics twitched their tails. The Thornax crossed their massive arms and watched. Cole Bennett stood alone in the pit, facing a warrior who had never been defeated. He took a slow breath and let it out. Then he planted his feet and waited. He was ready. Commander Drexel moved without warning. One moment he was standing still, and the next his primary right arm shot forward like a weapon launched from a cannon. The strike was faster than most eyes could follow. It was a test he gave every recruit, a sudden blow meant to show them how weak they were before the real assessment began. His fist connected with Cole's chest. The sound echoed through the silent chamber like a drum being struck. The human did not fly backward. He did not crumple to the ground. He did not even take a step back. Cole absorbed the impact with a slight shift of his weight. His feet stayed planted on the stone floor. A small grunt escaped his lips, but that was all. He remained standing exactly where he had been, his eyes still locked on the commander. Drexel stared at his own fist. He had felt the impact. He had felt the human's flesh and bone beneath his scales. The blow had landed perfectly. But something was wrong. The human should have been thrown across the pit. He should have been bleeding and struggling to breathe. He should have been broken. Is that the assessment? Cole asked quietly. The chamber erupted in whispers. The recruits in the seats above leaned closer, not believing what they had just seen. A Veth female clicked nervously to her companion, her antennae twitching with confusion. A Saurix male backed away from the edge of the pit, his tail swinging behind him. Even the Thornax, who feared nothing, exchanged glances with each other. Drexel struck again. This time, he used more force. His secondary arms joined the attack, and he threw 4 blows in rapid succession. Each punch was capable of denting military-grade armor. Each one would have killed a member of most species instantly. Cole moved with each strike, but only just enough. He shifted his weight. He turned his body. He redirected the force where he could and absorbed what he could not deflect. His feet slid across the stone floor but never left it. His body bent but never broke. When the barrage ended, Cole remained standing. His shirt was torn open. Dark bruises were already forming across his chest and ribs. Blood trickled from a cut on his shoulder where one of Drexel's scales had scraped his skin. His breathing was heavier now, but it was still controlled, still steady, and his eyes held something that made Drexel's scales prickle with an unfamiliar sensation. It was not defiance. It was not anger or fear. It was patience. The commander stepped back and examined his opponent with new eyes. In all his centuries of training recruits, he had never seen anything like this. The human was clearly injured. The damage was real. But he stood there as if the pain meant nothing, as if his body was simply a tool that would continue working until he told it to stop. "You should be on the ground," Drexel said. His voice was quieter now, stripped of its earlier contempt. "Should I?" Cole wiped blood from his face with the back of his hand. "I was not finished standing." A murmur ran through the crowd. The words seemed simple, even foolish. But there was something in the way the human said them that made everyone listening feel cold. Drexel attacked again. This time, he did not hold back at all. He used every technique he had learned over 400 years of combat training. He struck high and low. He aimed for joints and pressure points. He tried to sweep Cole's legs out from under him. He tried to grab him and throw him against the pit wall. Cole took every blow. He blocked what he could and accepted what he could not. His body twisted and bent in ways that would have broken a lesser being. But he kept finding his balance. He kept planting his feet. He kept standing. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. The crowd above had gone completely silent. They watched the impossible scene below with wide eyes and open mouths. A Corvan recruit named Vesa sat in the front row. She had been trained since birth for combat. She knew exactly how powerful Commander Drexel was. She had seen him break Thornax with his bare hands. She had watched him defeat entire squads of Sauric soldiers without taking a single hit. Now, she watched him rain destruction upon a creature half his size. A creature with no armor and no weapons, and that creature refused to fall. Vesa found herself leaning forward, her scales shifting from their usual gray to a pale blue that showed her fear. Not fear of the human. Fear of what the human represented. In the pit, Cole's left arm hung at an awkward angle. Something was wrong with his shoulder, likely dislocated from one of Drexel's throws. His right eye was swelling shut. Blood dripped from cuts on his face, his arms, his back. He moved more slowly now, and his breathing was ragged. But he was standing. Drexel stopped attacking. He stood a few feet away from the human, his forearms trembling slightly. Not from effort. From something else. From something that felt almost like fear. Why? Drexel demanded. "Why do you not fall? I have broken your bones. I have torn your muscles. Any other species would have collapsed long ago. Why do you keep standing?" Cole looked at him through his one good eye. Blood ran down his face like tears, but his expression was calm, almost peaceful. "Because falling is a choice," Cole said, "and I have not chosen it yet." Drexel took a step back. In all his years, no one had ever said those words to him. No one had ever stood before him after such punishment and spoken as if the pain was simply background noise, something to be acknowledged and then ignored. "Your body is failing," Drexel said. "I can see it. Your heart is working too hard. Your muscles are tearing themselves apart. You are dying on your feet." Cole smiled. It was a small smile, cracked and bloody, but real. "Humans have been dying on their feet for a long time," he said. "We have gotten very good at it." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Drexel looked at the small, broken creature before him and felt something shift inside his chest. The doubt he had felt earlier was growing. It was spreading through him like ice water in his veins. This was not a normal species. This was not a creature that understood limitations the way other species did. Humans did not measure themselves against what was possible. They measured themselves against their own will, and their will seemed to have no end. Drexel raised his fists again. He would break this human. He had to. Not for pride anymore, but because he needed to understand. He needed to know what would make a human finally fall. Cole planted his feet and waited. The commander attacked once more. And once more, the human remained unmoved. The medical bay on Verith Prime was filled with equipment that could heal almost any wound. Machines hummed quietly as they scanned bodies, repaired tissue, and rebuilt bone. The technology had been developed over thousands of years by species that had learned to survive the dangers of space and war. Physician Marin walked between the beds with soft footsteps. She was an Alluri, a species known for their healing abilities and their gentle nature. Her skin glowed with a soft blue light, and her large eyes reflected everything around her like mirrors. She had studied medicine for 2 centuries, and had treated warriors from every species in the coalition. She had never seen anything like the human on the bed before her. Cole Bennett lay still, while the machines worked on his body. His left shoulder had been put back in place. His cracked ribs were slowly mending. The cuts on his skin were closing, though they would leave scars. His right eye was still swollen, but the swelling was going down. He should have been unconscious. The amount of damage he had taken would have put any other species into a deep sleep for days. Instead, he was awake and watching her with his one good eye. "Does it hurt?" Marin asked softly. "Yes," Cole admitted, "but I have felt worse." Marin tilted her head. "When?" Cole thought for a moment. "When I was 15, I fell off a cliff while hiking. Broke both my legs and 3 ribs. Had to crawl 2 miles to get help because no one knew where I was." He shrugged, then winced at the movement. "This is not so bad." Marin stared at him. She had read the reports about Earth, about its dangerous environment and deadly creatures. But hearing a human describe such an experience so casually made her realize that the reports did not capture the full truth. Later that evening, Marin stood before the Academy Council. The room was filled with the highest-ranking officers from 7 different species. Admiral Sorath of the Veth sat at the head of the table, his compound eyes reflecting the dim light. Commander Drexel sat at the far end, silent and still. "His bones should be broken," Marin reported. She projected images of Cole's body above the table. The commander's strikes registered at forces that would normally kill a member of most species. "But look at the scans." The officers leaned forward to study the images. Cole's skeleton glowed on the display, and they could see hairline fractures across 3 of his ribs. "He is injured," Admiral Sorath observed. "The damage is real." "Yes," Marin agreed. "But he is already healing. Human bones become stronger after they break. Their bodies rebuild the damaged tissue and make it denser than before. They call this process adaptation." She paused to let the words sink in. "Their muscles work the same way. When human muscles tear, they grow back larger and stronger. Their entire species is designed to become more powerful through damage." A Thornax general made a rumbling sound of disbelief. "That is impossible. Damage weakens a body. That is the fundamental truth of biology." "Not for humans," Marin said. "Their world forced them to evolve differently. On Earth, everything is trying to kill them. The weather, the animals, even the plants. They develop bodies that use damage as fuel for improvement. She changed the image to show Cole's brain activity during the assessment. Waves of color moved across the display, showing the areas that had been active during the fight. This is even more interesting, Marin continued. Most species have a shutdown response to extreme pain. When the body takes too much damage, the brain forces it to stop moving so that it can begin healing. Humans have this response too, but they can override it. Admiral Sorath clicked his mandibles. Override it? How? Through will. Through training. Through simple stubbornness. Marin turned off the display and faced the council directly. Human history is filled with stories of individuals who kept fighting after injuries that should have killed them instantly. They have a saying on their world, mind over matter. They believe that if the mind refuses to accept defeat, the body will follow. The room fell silent. The officers looked at each other with expressions that ranged from skepticism to concern. Commander Drexel finally spoke. His voice was rough, as if the words were difficult to say. There is something else, he said. During the assessment, I hit him with everything I had. I held nothing back. I was trying to break him, not just test him. He paused and looked down at his 4 hands. By the end, I was tired. My arms ached. My hearts were pounding. And he was still standing. How long did the assessment last? Admiral Sorath asked. 3 hours. The room erupted in murmurs. No recruit had ever lasted more than 1 hour against Drexel. The idea that a soft-skinned human with no natural armor could endure 3 hours of punishment was beyond anything they had imagined. What ended the assessment? A Sarx officer asked. Drexel's scales shifted slightly, a sign of embarrassment among Corvins. I did. I ended it because I could not continue. He looked up at the council with eyes that held a new emotion. It took Marin a moment to recognize it as humility. The human was still standing when I stopped. He asked me when we would resume. Admiral Sorath sat back in his chair. His compound eyes moved slowly as he processed this information. He had commanded fleets in battle. He had witnessed species rise and fall. He thought he understood the nature of warfare and the limits of living beings. Now he was not sure. Physician Marin, he said slowly, you studied the human records before this one arrived. Tell me about their history. How did they survive on their death world? Marin nodded. They have a concept they call persistence hunting. Before they developed technology, humans would chase their prey for hours, sometimes days, until the animal collapsed from exhaustion. They did not need to be faster than their prey. They did not need to be stronger. They simply followed it without stopping until it could not run anymore. She looked around the room at the faces of the galaxy's greatest warriors. Humans are not built to win quickly. They are built to outlast. They are built to endure. And when everything else has fallen, they are built to still be standing. The council sat in silence, thinking about what this meant for the coalition. For centuries, they have measured strength by speed and power. They had valued species that could hit hard and move fast. They had never considered that the greatest weapon might be the simple refusal to fall. Drexel rose from his chair. For the first time in anyone's memory, he looked shaken. I need to train him, he said quietly. I need to understand what he is capable of. Because if one human can do this, there may be more. And if there are more, then we need to know what they can become. Admiral Sorath nodded slowly. Agreed. Train him. Test him. Find his limits. Drexel turned to leave, then stopped at the door. I'm not sure he has any, he said. Then he was gone, leaving the council to wonder what kind of species had just joined their coalition. The months that followed changed everything at the academy. Cole Bennett became more than a recruit. He became a subject of study, a puzzle that the instructors could not solve, a question that no one could answer, Every day brought new tests. Every test brought new surprises. In the first week, they tested his speed. The Veth recruits finished the running course in times that seemed impossible. Their bodies were built for quick movement, with multiple legs that carried them across any terrain. Cole finished last among all the recruits, his human legs working steadily but slowly. The instructors nodded. This was expected. Humans were not fast, but then they ran the course again. And again. And again. By the 10th run, the Veth recruits were slowing down. Their breathing was heavy, and their legs trembled beneath them. Some of them had to stop and rest, their bodies demanding a break that their minds could not refuse. Cole kept running. His pace never changed. Slow and steady, like a machine that did not know how to stop. He finished the course for the 20th time, while the fastest Veth recruit lay on the ground. Unable to move. In the 3rd week, they tested his strength. The Thornax recruits lifted weights that would crush a human instantly. Their massive bodies strained against loads measured in tons, and they roared with effort as they pushed their muscles to the limit. Cole could barely lift a fraction of what they could. His human muscles were thin and weak by comparison. The instructors recorded his numbers and moved on. This too was expected, but then they tested how many times each recruit could lift a smaller weight. The Thornax managed 30 repetitions before their bodies demanded rest. Cole managed 300. His arms burned and his muscles screamed, but he kept lifting. He kept going until the weight felt like nothing, until his body had simply accepted that this was what it would do now. The Thornax recruit, who watched him later, told the others what he saw. The human was crying, the Thornax said. Tears ran down his face from the pain, but his arms never stopped moving. It was like watching someone fight against death itself and refuse to lose. In the 5th week, they tested his ability to endure extreme environments. The cold chamber was designed to simulate the frozen worlds on the edge of Coalition space. The temperature dropped far below what most species could survive. Ice formed on the walls, and the air itself seemed to freeze. Cole entered the chamber wearing only his basic training clothes. The instructors expected him to last a few minutes at most. They had rescue teams standing by to pull him out when his body began to shut down. 1 hour passed. Then 2. Then 3. Inside the chamber, Cole's body temperature dropped to dangerous levels. His skin turned pale, and his fingers and toes grew numb. Ice crystals formed on his eyelashes, and every breath sent pain through his lungs. But he kept moving. He walked in circles around the chamber, forcing his muscles to generate heat. He breathed through his nose to warm the air before it reached his lungs. He focused his mind on a memory of warmth, a summer day from his childhood when the sun had burned his skin. When the instructors finally opened the chamber door, Cole walked out on his own feet. He was shaking badly, and his lips were blue. But he was alive, and he was standing. Physician Marin rushed to examine him. Her scanner showed damage throughout his body. Cells that had frozen and died, nerves that had been damaged by the cold. It would take days for him to fully recover. "You almost died," she told him. "Your core temperature was below what your species can survive." Cole smiled through chattering teeth. "It was below what we should survive comfortably." "That is not the same thing." Marin stared at him. She had heard these words before, from other humans in the historical records she had studied. It seemed to be a fundamental part of how they thought. As the weeks passed, the other recruits began to watch Cole differently. They no longer laughed at his slowness or his weakness. They watched him with something that looked like fear mixed with respect. A young Corvan recruit named Vesa was the first to approach him directly. She found him in the barracks one evening, sitting alone and staring at nothing. His body was covered in bruises from the day's training, and he moved slowly, like someone much older than his years. "How do you do it?" Vesa asked. She sat beside him on the bench, her scales shifting to a curious blue color. I watched you today. In the cold chamber, you should have died. Everyone thought you would die. Cole shrugged. I did not feel like dying. That is not an answer. It is the only answer I have. Cole looked at her with tired eyes. On Earth, everything is trying to kill you. The weather, the animals, the diseases, even the food can poison you if you are not careful. We learned a long time ago that survival is not about being the strongest or the fastest. It is about refusing to quit. Vessa's scale shifted again, this time to a thoughtful gray. Your world sounds horrible. It is beautiful, Cole said softly. But yes, it is also trying to kill us. Maybe that is what makes it beautiful. We earned our right to live there. Every generation fought to survive, and every generation passed that fight to the next one. He looked down at his hands, at the cuts and bruises that covered them. My grandmother used to tell me stories about our ancestors. They crossed oceans in wooden boats. They climbed mountains that reached into the sky. They walked across deserts that stretched for thousands of miles with no water and no food. Most of them died along the way, but some of them made it. Some of them kept going until they found what they were looking for. Vessa leaned closer. What were they looking for? Cole smiled. Something better. Something worth the pain. He met her eyes. That is what humans do. We endure the pain because we believe there is something on the other side of it. And even when there is not, even when the pain is all there is, we keep going. Because stopping is not in our nature. Vessa sat with him in silence for a long time after that. She thought about her own training, about the time she had wanted to quit but had pushed through anyway. She had thought she understood endurance. Now she realized she had only scratched the surface. The next morning, she joined Cole in his extra training sessions. Other recruits followed soon after. They wanted to learn what the human knew. They wanted to understand how he kept standing when everything said he should fall. Cole taught them the only thing he knew how to teach. He taught them to ignore the voice that told them to stop. He taught them to see pain as information, not as a command. He taught them that the body could do far more than the mind believed. If only the mind would get out of the way. By the end of the 6th month, something had changed at the academy. The recruits were different. They trained harder. They endured longer. They complained less. And when they were asked what had changed, they all gave the same answer. The humans showed us what we could become. The final assessment came at the end of the training cycle. Every recruit would face Commander Drexel in single combat, a test of everything they had learned over the past year. Those who passed would graduate and join the coalition military. Those who failed would be sent home in shame. The assessment chamber was packed with spectators. Word had spread far beyond the academy walls. Military officials from 7 species had traveled across the galaxy to witness what would happen when the human faced Drexel again. Cole sat in the waiting area with the other recruits. His body was calm, his breathing slow and steady. The months of training had changed him. He was leaner now, his muscles harder beneath his skin. Scars covered his arms and chest, each one a memory of a lesson learned through pain. Vessa sat beside him, her scales shifting between nervous green and excited gold. She had passed her own assessment an hour earlier, lasting 12 minutes against Drexel before the commander ended the fight. It was the best performance by a Corvan recruit in 30 years. Are you ready? She asked Cole. He nodded slowly. I have been ready since the day I arrived. What will you do? He's stronger than you, faster than you. He has 4 arms and centuries of experience. Cole smiled slightly. I will stand there and let him hit me. Vessa stared at him. That is not a strategy. It is the only strategy I have. Cole stood as his name was called. Humans do not win by fighting better. We win by refusing to lose. He walked toward the pit. and the crowd fell silent. Thousands of eyes watched him descend the stone stairs. He looked small against the massive chamber, a single figure walking towards something that should have terrified him. Drexel was already waiting in the pit. The commander had changed over the months since their first meeting. The contempt was gone from his eyes. In its place was something that looked almost like respect, though it was mixed with determination. "You have proven yourself to be more than I expected," Drexel said, as Cole reached the bottom of the pit. "But this is where it ends. I will not hold back. I need to know what a human can truly endure." Cole nodded. "I understand. Do you?" Drexel moved closer, his forearms flexing. "I have studied your species since we first met. I know about your persistence hunting. I know about your ability to recover from damage. I know about your stubborn refusal to accept defeat." He stopped just a few feet away, looking down at the human. "Today, I will find your limit. I will find the point where even a human must fall." Cole looked up at him without fear. "Then, we are here for the same reason. I want to know my limit too." The fight began. Drexel attacked with everything he had learned over 400 years. His strikes were faster and more precise than they had been in their first assessment. He targeted Cole's joints, his pressure points, the weak spots in his human body that months of observation had revealed. Cole did not try to match him. He could not match him. Instead, he did what humans had always done. He absorbed. He endured. He refused to fall. The first hour passed. Cole's body was covered in bruises, and blood ran from cuts on his face and arms. His right knee was damaged, making him limp slightly as he moved. But he kept standing. The second hour passed. One of Cole's ribs cracked audibly, and the crowd gasped at the sound. His breathing became labored, each breath a painful effort. But he kept standing. The third hour passed. Drexel's attacks began to slow. The commander was breathing heavily now, his forearms trembling with exhaustion. He had never fought this long before. No opponent had ever forced him to. "Fall," Drexel demanded, throwing another punch. "Just fall." Cole absorbed the blow and remained on his feet. His one good eye met Drexel's gaze. "No." The fourth hour began. The crowd had stopped whispering. They watched in absolute silence as something unprecedented unfolded before them. A human, broken and bleeding, stood against the most decorated combat instructor in the galaxy. Drexel's movements became desperate. He attacked Cole's injured knee, trying to force him to the ground. Cole's leg buckled, and he dropped to one knee. The crowd held its breath. Then Cole pushed himself back up. Slowly, painfully, but completely. "How?" Drexel gasped. His arms hung at his sides, too tired to lift. "How are you still standing?" "I have broken you. I can see the damage. Your body should have stopped working hours ago." Cole swayed slightly but kept his balance. Blood dripped from his chin onto the stone floor. His breath came in ragged gasps. "My body stopped working an hour ago," Cole admitted. His voice was weak but steady. "But my body does not get to decide when I fall." "I do." Drexel stared at him. In that moment, he understood something that all his centuries of training had never taught him. Strength was not about how hard you could hit. Speed was not about how fast you could move. The true measure of a warrior was something simpler and more terrifying. It was the willingness to keep standing when every part of you begged to stop. Drexel fell to his knees, not from a blow, but from exhaustion. His forearms trembled, and his breathing was ragged. For the first time in his life, he had been outlasted. "I yield," Drexel said. The words seemed to cost him everything. "I cannot continue." Cole stood over him, barely upright, more blood than man at this point. He should have collapsed hours ago. He should have been carried out on a stretcher. Instead, he reached down and offered his hand to the commander. "Thank you," Cole said, "for showing me I do not have a limit." Drexel took the hand and allowed himself to be helped to his feet. The crowd erupted in sounds that Cole had never heard before. Cheers, clicks, roars, and whistles mixed together into something that sounded like awe. Drexel turned to face the spectators. His voice carried through the chamber despite his exhaustion. "Let the record show that recruit Cole Bennett has passed the final assessment. Not by defeating me in combat, but by doing something far more difficult." He placed a clawed hand on Cole's shoulder. He remained unmoved. The Galactic Coalition had always measured worth by speed and strength and natural weapons. For millennia, they had judged species by how fast they could kill and how much damage they could inflict. But after that day on Vareth Prime, a new metric entered their calculations. They began to ask not only how hard a species could hit, but how long they could stand after being hit. Cole Bennett returned to Earth as the first human graduate of the Galactic Military Academy. He was welcomed as a hero, though he never saw himself that way. When asked about his time at the Academy, about the moment that changed how the galaxy saw humanity, he would simply shrug. "I did not do anything special," he would say. "I just did not fall down." Years later, the Galactic Coalition faced a threat that nearly destroyed them. An enemy fleet appeared at the edge of their space, vast and powerful beyond anything they had ever seen. The Coalition forces fought bravely, but they were pushed back world by world. System by system. When all seemed lost, they sent a message to Earth. They asked for help. The humans came. They came in ships that were slower than the Veth vessels and weaker than the Thornax cruisers. They came with bodies that could be broken and weapons that were outdated. They came knowing they would lose many of their own, and they kept coming. They would not stop. They would not retreat. They would not accept defeat. The enemy, who had conquered 100 species, found themselves facing something they had never encountered before. An opponent that refused to give up. An opponent that simply would not fall. The war lasted 5 years. The humans took losses that would have broken any other species. But they kept fighting. They adapted. They endured. They stood. In the end, the enemy withdrew. Not because they were defeated in battle, but because they realized they could never truly win. You cannot defeat someone who refuses to accept defeat. The day the war ended, a memorial was built on Vareth Prime. It stood in the center of the Academy's assessment pit, where Cole Bennett had once shown the galaxy what humans were capable of. The memorial was simple. Just a stone pillar with 4 words carved into its surface. 4 words that described humanity better than any report or study ever could. They remained unmoved. And somewhere in the galaxy, on a small blue world called Earth, humans continued doing what they had always done. They struggled. They suffered. They fell down, and they got back up again, because that is what humans do. They do not know how to stay down. They do not know how to quit. They do not know how to accept that something is impossible. And in a universe full of species that measured strength by how hard they could hit, humanity measured strength by something simpler, by how long they could stand.